So today on the bench, I want to tie you up Dawn's Euro Jig Nymph. Now it's a nymph I've been using on the Columbia River most springs. And actually I did a video recently, probably a couple weeks ago. Everybody's probably seen it on YouTube when I was actually nymphing the Columbia River. And this is the jig I was using. Highly effective jig. I was given one a few years ago by Todd Oishi, a great competitive angler. And he gave me one of his and he said, you got to try this. He didn't name it. It was just one of his jigs. I had a couple. I've lost them. I think this is close. I've tried to replicate it. I remember it had, you know, an important ingredient, this pink color to it on the thorax. It was also had a hot spot on it. It had a, you know, some flash. It was kind of orangey in color. I'm trying to imitate it the best I can, but here's the Euro Nymph that I use on the Columbia that's super effective. And when I talk about a Euro Nymph, it's just a really heavily weighted fly. It's got the 5/32 bead on it, really heavy fly, gets you to the bottom in a hurry where the fish are feeding. And that's so important when you're fishing nymphs. So make sure you have the materials ready before you tie the fly, and we'll get on with Dawn's Euro Jig Nymph. So let's quickly go over the materials you're going to need to tie the fly. I'm actually using a 8/450 barbless jig hook. So it's a size 12. I really like the 450s in the Hannock version. They're an excellent jig hook. As I mentioned before, I've got a 5/32 or a 3.8 millimeter gold bead. Quite aggressive. I mean, you want it weighted. We're actually going to weight it a little further with some 0.015 lead wire. You could go with the 0.2, even 0.25, but you'll see why I'm going to use the 0.015 when we start tying. I'm actually going to use, this is very important, the wax thread. So I've got the Semperfli, you know, the hot orange that I like to finish with. It's a 12/0 thread, and that's what we're going to actually use to tie with. For the tail, I'm actually going to use some hot orange ring neck pheasant rump. Really good for the tail. And I like to match the body color. I'm actually going to use this this orange stretch flex for the body, and I like to match similar with the tail. So if I'm tying in a green or a you know, a red stretch flex, I'll match that with the color of the tail. So this works really well for the tail side. As far as the rib, we're going to use the 0.2 millimeter brown. It's a real nice brown tying wire, the 0.2 millimeter. And we're going to use some medium silver tinsel for the back. Makes a real nice back on the fly. So let's get it going. So we've got the bead on the hook. Now what we're going to do is take some lead wire. I'm going to take 10 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pull it off. And then I push it forward. So the bead, I'm going to actually push it into the bead. So it sits directly in the bead real nice. And then I'll just get rid of this excess. I'll wrap it in a little bit and just have that lead fold over. And that'll just hold the bead in position. So once the lead's in there, I push it into the bead and it's kind of hidden, so it just gives it a little extra weight. Now we're going to go in with our thread right behind the lead, and just to hold it in place. It holds the bead in place and it holds the lead in place. And then we'll just wrap over our lead because we want a real nice base on this pattern. And it is they are chubby little patterns, right? They're nymphs. They come out looking really good, but you want them short and fairly fat. So now that we have the body tied in, I'm going to take some of my pheasant rump. Just going to pull some of the fibers down, and I only want, you know, I want about 4 or 5 long legs on this, or tail, sorry. So I'm going to take that, and I've got a few long, short, you know, I've got some short strands there and some long ones. So I've got about 4 or 5 left. Measure it up about the length of the body and go back. What I do is take 1 or 2 light wraps. So there's a couple light wraps, and then I can pull it and just adjust it to the length I want. And the tail, we don't want it too long because it is a short, you know, imitating a mayfly nymph or other nymphs. Go once behind and then wrap over. And then what I like to do is wrap up to where I put the lead in, and that gives it a nice even body with the taper. So you can see a nice even taper on the body. Always the next stage is I always like to tie the wire in first. So I go in different order. So my body is going to go in last, so it's going to be tied in last. the rib's going to be wrapped over, or sorry, the rib will be tied over last, so I'm tying it in first. Then my back, as far as my tinsel, and then my body, because I'm going to tie it in first. So we'll just start the wire anywhere on the hook, just on the side here, and wrap it back. And copper works really good, but I found this brown with this color orange sets it off the best. It seems to be the best color. So wrap that in, bring it back up to the front. Now we're going to take our tinsel, and with the tinsel you'll notice there's a copper side and a silver side. So what we want is the copper side toward us. Start on the side of the hook. So place that tinsel on kind of on the side, and as you wrap your thread over, it's going to pull it to the top of the hook. And then as you pull it to the top, keep wrapping back, and now you'll have that tinsel right on the top of the hook when you bring it over. And of course these jig hooks flip upside down, but we do want to tie this essentially on the bottom or the top as we're tying it. Okay, now we've got that tied in, wrap that back. Now take some of our orange stretch flex. Really cool material to make segmented bodies. Just tie it in at the front, take a few wraps, and then pull it tight, because we want it fairly thin at the back. So you're going to pull that really tight and stretch it out. And then once it's tied in, just wrap your thread forward. And kind of form a tapered underbody. So there's a nice tapered underbody. And then I'm pulling the stretch flex quite hard as I wrap initially to keep it thin at the back, and then I'm loosening up as I go, as I'm wrapping forward. And you can see the segmentation of the body forms a nice segmented body, and as I get near the top, I'm just easing right off on pulling it. So as you wrap it in, give it a couple of tie overs, pull it tight, and snip off your excess. So now that we've got the body tied in, we're going to bring our flash over the top, over the back. And what we do is one quick loose wrap. We just want to get that positioned real nice at the top. And once you have it positioned right at the top, take another wrap over, one in front, another over, and then snip off your excess. So now we have a nice flash back on the fly. And now we're going to form the rib. Now, some people will reverse the rib order and go around. I like to secure my tail in, so I'll actually start right at the back. And I like to take about 5 ribs up there. There's 3, there's 4, and the 5th one right at the head. And I forgot to mention what I'm going to finish with the dubbing at the beginning on my materials, but that's okay. We'll show everybody now. So what I'm going to do is, again, just helicopter the wire until it pops off, and then you've got no loose edges. And what the material, I forgot to mention in the very beginning, one of the most important materials is our shrimp, this UV scud shrimp color. I love this for the thorax. It makes just a highlighted thorax. I also really like this light minnow, or it's kind of a minnow blue. It's really, really nice color. It's actually a green, but it's got a really nice color to it. But I love to finish with this shrimp color, so you have to have that. So now we're going to do, to finish the fly off, we've got a real nice body now, nice short little stubby guy. Take really small amounts of this pink dubbing. It's really, really shrimp color, just small amounts, because you want it quite thin, and I want to wrap it in good. And I don't want it, again, too bulky. So I'm just going to take a few wraps on there. You don't need a whole bunch. And once you have that nicely wrapped on your thread, and we got it, nicely positioned, take a few wraps. And now what I like to do is I wrap over. You can see how I just wrapped it over, and I'm wrapping the thread through that just to hold it in place. And that's really going to position that material and hold it in place nicely. And then we'll cut out any of the real heavy parts after. Now we want to finish with a nice hot orange collar on the fly. So I'm going to take a couple of wraps there, and then we're going to do a couple of sets of whip finishes just to have it so it's got a real nice hot spot. So there's 1, 2, 3, finish like that, and then another few, 2, 3, 4 there. So now we've got a real nice hot spot. Now before I I actually cut off my thread. There's different things you can use. I've got the super glue I like to use, and I'll actually wrap it with super glue and then wrap in and then wrap it back over and cut off my thread. Makes it really nice. Or you could take some of our UV coating. So what I'll do is I'll UV coat this thread. So it just helps when you UV coat the thread nice and thick there. Put a nice bit on there. Now you just wrap over. So I've UV coated the whole head without making a mess. Back off that thread, back to where you whip finished. So now that's all gone in. That UV coating has gone in there. So before you cut off your thread, hit that with your UV light, and now you've got a nice UV coating or, super glue coating on your head without making a mess of the head, without affecting the dubbing and really making a mess of that dubbing, which a lot of people do. You'll get it's pretty tough to get this in here and get it all nice without making a mess of your head. So that's a good trick to use. Just coat your thread, wrap it over, unwind it, and then hit it again. So now we're ready to cut it off. So we just snip that close, and there it is. There is our finished fly. Now you can see it's really cool. It's got the nice glitter back on it. It's got a real nice pink thorax head. These little bits here that are longer, you can cut them off if you want. I cut off a few, but as it gets eaten, as the fish eat that, this splays out more. All that dubbing kind of pushes and forms legs, so it's actually quite buggy in the water. You can see how the tail matches the body. You got a real nice underbody. This fly will sit like this, vertically. It bounces on the bottom. That flash sometimes really sparkles off the rocks, and it is a great attractor pattern. It's a great nymph. Probably the best nymphs I've ever used when I'm fishing rivers. So if you want to nymph a river effectively and you want something that you want to go into a stream and catch a ton of fish, go in a river and get a ton of fish that are feeding on the bottom, you have to have these Euro nymphs.